At Fermentis, we pride ourselves on providing high-quality yeast and fermentation products for brewers. Our SAF yeast range, with easy-to-use certification, can be pitched directly into your wort. But rest assured, you can still rehydrate if that's your way of doing things. Because at Fermentis, we want to help you save time and effort without ever compromising on flexibility and choices. It's up to you. Be creative. Be free. Love beer. Fermentis, the obvious choice for beverage fermentation.
Hello everyone, I'm Gordon Strong with the Beer Judge Certification Program. I'm the President Emeritus and the author of the BJCP Style Guidelines, which is an important thing to talk about because I want to tell you about the Brazilian style Catharina Sour. I discovered this style on a visit to Brazil the first time about 6 years ago. I was in Florianopolis for a homebrew competition hosted by the Essa here, and the brewers told me about this wonderful new style they had. It's a sour beer and it features fresh Brazilian fruit. I was very interested and I asked the local brewers if they could arrange a tasting for me, and they brought 6 or 7 different examples, and they had a full description of the style, and we tasted the beers, and it was wonderful. It was good that I learned this because in that competition, a Catharina Sour won the Best of Show award. It was a wonderful beer made with guava, and I learned to love the style then. And every time I've come back, I've looked for that style in different breweries in and around Florianopolis. So some people may ask, well, what is a Catharina Sour and how does it differ from some other beer styles? Well, the first thing I'd say about a Catharina Sour is that it's a sour beer. It's a sour beer that features a fresh fruit character. It's made with Pilsner malt and wheat, but the malt isn't really that important because it's meant to be in the background. The beer is really all about the fruit with sourness that supports it. It's a beer that has very little bitterness because the sour is providing the balance to all the sweetness in the beer, and the fruit is dominant. It has to be a fresh character, not a cooked character. It can't taste like jam or pasteurized beer. The fruit character has to be the most center part of the beer. So this is a very light and refreshing beer style. It's an average strength beer, perhaps 4.5 to 5.5% alcohol, and it's well carbonated, and it's the perfect kind of beer for the warm weather you have here. So it's a very refreshing style, and I'm very interested in trying as many examples as I can. It helps me learn about the different kinds of Brazilian fruit. And if I have favorite examples, I don't always get them because the fruit tends to be used when it's in season, when it's ripe, when it's fresh, when it's available. One time I was here in August, and one place had 3 different strawberry beers, And I said, well, why is this? Are strawberries popular? It's like, no. Strawberries are in season right now, and the brewery happens to be in the area where strawberries are grown, so it's what they have, and it's local, and it's fresh. Other times I've been here and had these kind of oranges or tangerines, these clemenulis they called them, and wonderful, wonderful orange flavor in beer. But people in the United States ask me about the kinds of fruit and says, well, it has to be tropical fruit. I said, no, it has to be Brazilian fruit, meaning it's fruit that's fresh and local in Brazil. And certainly Brazil has some fruit that the United States has. Certainly the United States grows strawberries and many other kind of berries, cherries as well, oranges, certainly. But I enjoy the ones that have tropical fruit, ones that have passion fruit and dragon fruit, mango, those kind of flavors, pineapple. Those make for a very refreshing beer because the tropical fruit can often be very complex. And it also goes well with the warm climate. One thing about Catharina Sours as a fruit beer is that they can also have some spices and some herbs and possibly some certain kinds of vegetables. I very, very rarely see vegetables in a Catharina Sour, but I have had ones that have had cucumber or pepino in it. I think spices are becoming more popular, and on this most recent trip I've been in Brazil, I've noticed how the examples have changed from the first days when there were mostly one fruit or maybe two fruits to maybe a mix of fruit or fruit with extra herbs or spices. I've seen ones with ginger or hibiscus or basil, mint, lots of interesting flavors. But I will always order a Catharina Sour that features a Brazilian fruit that does not have a name in English, because I know that's one that I probably have never tried before. So I've had ones featuring jabuticaba, for example. It's kind of like a big grape that grows in these big clusters. Very Brazilian fruit. Some of those fruits appear in other Brazilian food products. I've had chocolates before here that have a filling of a fruit called cupuaçu, and I think that makes a nice addition to a Catharina Sour. So the beer doesn't necessarily have to have tropical fruit, it just has to have fresh local fruit. Some American brewers think if you make a fruit beer, you can just open a can of fruit puree and that's just as good as fresh fruit. If you try them side by side, you know that you lose a little bit of flavor when you've had the fruit that's been processed more. So I like to see the use of fresh fruit wherever possible because I think it makes an important flavor difference. And more importantly to me, the Brazilians who created the style really believe that the fresh fruit character is important to the overall perception of quality of the beer. So that's about the fruit and the possible spices or vegetables that support the fruit. So now let's talk about the sourness, since that's the next big part of the beer. For me, what distinguishes a Catharina Sour is that it has a very clean, smooth, lactic sourness. So this is a bright, fresh, clean sourness. It should never be funky or vinegary or have very complex flavors. It's produced with lactobacillus that causes this flavor, and it's produced very quickly. So there isn't time for these other flavors to really develop. So with a clean lactic sourness and fresh fruit, it's a beer that really should be enjoyed fresh. So after it's made, it should be consumed, preferably, someplace on the beach or nearby. I've certainly done a lot of that. Some people have asked me, okay, there are other sour beer styles out there. What makes a Catharina Sour different than that? Like Berliner Weiss. Sometimes judges might say Berliner Weiss with fruit is really what a Catharina Sour is. But if you look at the definition of the German beer style Berliner Weiss, it's really a lower alcohol beer. It's usually 3% alcohol or less, very low, whereas a Catharina Sour is a normal strength beer. A German Berliner Weiss also can have some Brettanomyces in it. Not the kind that give the funky flavors, but the kind that give the fruity flavors. And that's a sort of an important secondary part of the Berliner Weiss profile. And that's not in Catharina Sour at all. Catharina Sour is just clean lactic sourness. So that's the difference with Berliner Weiss. Mostly the alcohol level, but also the type of bacteria that's in there. The lactobacillus is really what's creating the flavor profile. So the Catharina Sour also has some good body to it. It shouldn't be too thin, because when you have lactic sourness on the palate, it makes the beer taste thinner. So the beer should be a little thicker to start with, because the sourness will cut through that to make it refreshing. It should be dry, but not so super dry that it's hard to drink. When you add some of these fruits, you're bringing in some acidity with that as well, and perhaps some tannin. And on the palate, that can also create a drying feeling. So the balance should be very refreshing and drinkable. It shouldn't be super acidic or super dry. It should be what a reasonable person would want to drink. If the fruit is too aggressive in its sourness and tannin, or also it's bitter. Some fruit are a little bitter. Then that can make the beer harder to drink. You need to be able to drink a few glasses of it because it tastes so good. So I've judged these beers in Brazil in a number of different competitions, and they've actually won several awards that I know of. I judged in a competition that had over 500 entries, a homebrew competition, and the best of show beer was a Catharina Sour, and this one was with caju and very Brazilian fruit. I had the juice of this several times, especially more up north. Milky white looking juice, and the beer looked that way as well when it was fermented. It was kind of funny when it came time to judge the beer. They started setting down the samples, and I'm like, is that one caju? And the beer is like this far away from my nose. So I'm like, well, if the gringo can like tell you what the fruit is from across the table, it's probably pretty prominent. So it went on to win the best of show of that competition as well. The competition I just judged in, the Brazil Beer Cup had the most entries in any category was American IPA, which happens in most competition. But the second most entered category was Catharina Sour. And that's actually up a little bit. You know, maybe it's because it's in this area, but in several competitions in Brazil, I've seen it be after IPA and Pale Ale, Catharina Sour is entered quite a bit. So it is a popular style, not just in Brazil. I've had other countries in South America ask me about the guidelines because they get translated into different languages. I write them in English, they get translated into Portuguese, they get translated into Spanish, they get translated into many different languages. And people in other Spanish-speaking countries in South America really wanted a Spanish version of that. Not because they were necessarily producing them, but because when they have a competition, the beers from Brazil come in and you better know how to judge a Catharina Sour because you're going to get a lot of those entered. So that's where the style is today. As I said, I've seen the style evolve over the last 5 or 6 years from, it seemed like a new product when I first found it. It was, homebrewers were very excited about it. There were a couple of breweries making it. And now I see examples almost everywhere I go. You go into a bar, it has 20 taps, and you might find 2 or 3 Catharina Sours. And I think that's great. I think that's nice to have those options. And I will always sample a new version when I see it. The guidelines are being updated as we speak. We're coming out with a BJCP 2021 guidelines, and I'm happy to say the Catharina Sour style is being moved from a provisional style available on the BJCP website into the main guidelines, where it'll be a regional style for Brazil. Portuguese translation, English translation, so it can be used by any competition around the world. So as this first recognized Brazilian beer style, I think it's a pretty important accomplishment because it came from home brewers and professional brewers getting together to develop a style based around ingredients that Brazil does very well. I think Brazil might have other opportunities to look at other ingredients that you have. You have some very interesting woods that are used in beer. You produce coffee. There are a lot of ingredients that you can use that people in other countries would be interested to taste. But when I travel here, aside from a caipirinha or two, I really do reach for the Catharina Sour because it's like finding a great Brazilian fruit that you can enjoy and putting it in a glass and you can carry it around with you. So I really do think the style is wonderful, it's refreshing, it's fruity, it's Brazil. So I'm very proud that to include the style in the BJCP guidelines. And if you're ever in Brazil, I hope you seek it out.